Okay, so I bet you're curious how cannabis and Adderall mix, what happens in your brain when THC meets Adderall?
Cool.
And that's exactly what we're going to dive into today.
That's okay.
We found this article called Dude, Where's My Dopamine? Kind of funny title, right?
Yeah.
But it gets into some serious science. They actually did this study. Get this. They gave mice daily doses of THC.
Really?
Yeah. Through a vaporizer, no less.
Wow.
We're going to break down all the science, but the big question we're tackling is, how does THC mess with Adderall's effects, and what does that mean for anyone out there who might be using both?
Yeah, so in the study, scientists gave mice THC every day for 10 days straight. Then they gave them Adderall, and they used these MRI scans to see what was going on in their brains. What they found was kind of wild. The THC actually made the Adderall way less effective, especially in parts of the brain that control focus and motivation, like the prefrontal cortex and the thalamus.
So, it's not just some, stoner myth. There's, real proof that THC can change how Adderall works.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's important to remember, like dopamine, that's the key to focus and motivation.
Right.
Adderall usually pumps up those dopamine levels, which is why you feel more alert and driven. But when THC comes into play, it throws a wrench in the whole process, specifically in the mesolimbic pathway, which is, crucial for how we experience reward.
Okay, so if THC is messing with how dopamine works, would someone taking Adderall, feel less motivated even if they take their meds like they're supposed to?
Right.
It seems kind of weird because, some people say cannabis makes them more creative and stuff.
That's a good point. And it gets complicated. THC on its own can have stimulating effects, but how it interacts with Adderall is, more complicated.
Yeah.
It's probably because of how THC affects the endocannabinoid system,
Yeah.
which, controls dopamine release. And it brings up this really interesting question. Would other cannabinoids, like CBD, maybe, since it interacts differently with the endocannabinoid system, could it have different effects on Adderall?
That's a good question.
It's wild that they, actually used a vaporizer on these mice.
Yeah, it's pretty high tech.
It's like they're trying to mimic real-world use, which I guess makes the results more relevant,
Right.
But anyway, back to the study. So after, all that THC, does the brain just stay in this kind of dampened state?
Well, here's the good news. The study found that after a 2-week break from THC, the mice's brains went back to normal. The Adderall started working like it was supposed to again.
Huh.
So that suggests that, the effects are probably reversible.
That's great to hear, but it makes me wonder, what does this mean for folks who use both cannabis and Adderall regularly? Does it, imply that taking breaks from THC might be important if you're managing ADHD with medication?
It's definitely something to think about, especially since some people might try to, up their Adderall dose if they think it's not working.
Yeah.
Which, that's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
It could lead to dependence and all sorts of other problems. Right. It's so important to talk to your doc about using cannabis, especially if you're on meds like Adderall. Right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Open communication with your doctor is so, so important. They need all the info, to give you the right treatment and keep you safe. Hiding stuff about cannabis use, it's like trying to fix a car without telling the mechanic you've been putting diesel in a gas engine.
Right.
It just doesn't work.
It's too bad. There's still so much stigma around cannabis, even when it's legal.
Yeah.
It might stop people from talking to their doctors, having those conversations that are so important.
For sure. It really shows how much we need more understanding about cannabis, to get rid of that stigma, especially when it comes to medical treatment.
Yeah.
The more we can talk about it openly, the better people can, advocate for their own health.
Totally. One thing that stood out to me in this article was how much it emphasized self-awareness, recognizing that even small choices can affect our brain chemistry. It's a wake-up call to, be more mindful of how we treat our brains.
Right. It's about taking charge of our well-being, understanding that choices, even like using cannabis, can have a ripple effect on, brain function and overall health. We've got to remember our brains are these super complex and fragile ecosystems.
Yeah. And even though this research talks about potential downsides, it also offers hope, right? Those mice bouncing back after taking a break from THC, that's pretty inspiring.
It really is. It shows how resilient our brains are, and how much they can recover. Maybe it's a sign for all of us to be a little nicer to our brains, no matter what choices we make.
Yeah, I love that. Maybe that's the takeaway here. Moderation and balance are key, not just for our physical health, but for our mental and cognitive well-being too.
Exactly. This deep dive into dopamine, THC, and Adderall has been really interesting. It's shown us how like stuff from the outside can mess with the way our brains work.
Right. This whole thing has made me realize just how complex the human brain is. And we've been talking about THC and Adderall, but I wonder, could other stuff we consume, even things that are supposed to be good for us, have weird effects on our brain chemistry too?
That's a great question.
Mm.
I mean, it's probably safe to say that anything we put in our bodies, eat, drink, whatever, can interact with our brains in ways we don't even realize.
So, like, what are we supposed to do? Walk on eggshells and stress about everything we eat and drink?
Not really. It's not about like living in fear. It's more about making informed choices.
Mm.
The more we know about these interactions, the better decisions we can make for our brains.
Yeah, knowledge is power, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This article really encourages people to be proactive. Talk to your doctor, stay up to date on the research, and pay attention to what your body's telling you.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. It's amazing how a study about mice and vaporizers can make us think so deeply about our own habits.
Totally. It just goes to show how powerful scientific research can be.
Yeah.
Like, it can shine a light on the most unexpected things. Who knew a simple question like, what happens when you mix cannabis and Adderall could lead to such deep insights?
Yeah, it's like everything's connected, isn't it? Our brains, what we choose to do, the stuff we use, it's all part of this big, complicated system.
That's true. And the more we learn, the more we can appreciate just how amazing and complex our bodies are.
Okay, so to wrap up our deep dive today, we learned that THC can actually make Adderall less effective, especially in those brain areas that are super important for focus and motivation. But the good news is those effects seem to be reversible. Like, the brain can recover after you take a break from THC.
Right. That's a key takeaway. And even though we've been talking about THC and Adderall specifically, I think this brings up a bigger point about how lots of things we consume can affect, our brain chemistry. Even things that seem totally harmless or even good for us could have some unexpected effects.
Like that analogy you used before with the diesel and a gas engine.
Exactly.
It's a good reminder to think about what we're putting into our bodies, and how it could be affecting our brains.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about being proactive. Talk to your doctor, stay informed about the latest research, and most importantly, listen to what your body's telling you.
Well, this deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about. Like you said earlier, knowledge is power, right? And when it comes to our brains, the more we understand, the better choices we can make to keep our minds healthy. If even those little mice can bounce back from too much THC, maybe it's a sign that we should all be a little kinder to our brains? Whether that means moderation, watching what we consume, or just taking some time to relax and recharge.
That's a great point. Our brains really are incredibly resilient.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into dopamine, THC, and Adderall. It's been a fascinating journey. And hopefully you're leaving with a new appreciation for the wonders of your own brain and the power of making good choices. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.